let me tell you a story of how we went from this to this. And it's really a no-brainer why Sega and Paramount would want to make a Sonic movie, and even though it was kind of a rocky journey, one terrible, awful design later and an amazing redesign, we're at the point we are now, where we're getting another movie this year, and we're getting a spin-off TV show. But let's not waste any more time. Let's get into why exactly these movies are so great, not just for the Sonic franchise, but also just in general. When it comes to the plot of the first Sonic movie, there's really not much to chew on. It's more of a buddy cop road movie with some Sonic elements slapped onto it, and of course, Sonic himself being the main character. But I would argue that its biggest strength is how it decides to treat all of these characters that we've grown up with. Let's just talk about Sonic first, the main one, the one we all care about, let's be honest. Sonic is actually pretty great in these movies. He is nothing like his game counterpart at all. This Sonic in the movies is kind of more childish and immature and less cocky and edgy like the game Sonic is. But what makes movie Sonic so compelling is the fact that he actually has fears and he shows a lot of emotion, more emotion than what we see from the game version of Sonic anyways. And I'm gonna be honest, I really like this approach to the character. He feels more human, if you will, and I think that's a pretty unique angle to take. Also, Ben Schwartz does a really good job voicing the character. He really encaptures Sonic's energy very well. Another thing that these movies do that I find pretty interesting when it comes to Sonic's character is that they decide to give him more of a backstory. We learn that he's from another planet, obviously, probably Mobius, we don't know really, and he ends up coming to Earth because his caretaker is eventually hunted down by a bunch of Echidna warriors, and he just kind of moves to Earth to get away from all of that. And it's a really interesting angle to take. Sonic has never really had a backstory in the games or anything like that, so explaining how this Sonic even gets to Earth, which the whole concept of Sonic and being on Earth and interacting with humans has been done numerous times before in the games and obviously in Sonic X, and yeah, it works for the most part. Speaking of, let's talk about some of the human side characters in these movies. I really enjoy Tom and Maddie, played by Tika Sumpter and by James Marsden, respectfully. They have such a great dynamic with Sonic, and I think it really works. Sonic's never really had a family in the games. He sort of does in the Archie comics, but in the movies, Tom and Maddie are effectively Sonic's adoptive parents, and their bond is very sweet. I really enjoy James Marsden as Tom. He arguably is one of the funniest characters, besides Jim Carrey as Eggman, which I'll get to later. And Tika Sumpter also has some great moments as Maddie. She's really great and just brings a great energy to the movies in general. The only issue I have with the human side characters is I feel like they need to tone down and maybe stop giving so much screen time to certain characters, because that's a problem that Sonic 2 has. Alright, now it's time to talk about the GOAT. Casting Jim Carrey as Eggman was the greatest decision they made. Dude is literally him. In the first movie, Eggman seems to be a little bit more grounded and a much more realistic take on the character. I mean, he doesn't even have the iconic Eggman design at the beginning. He doesn't have the stash, the goggles, the red suit. He's not even fat. But that's the thing. You get to see Eggman in the first movie slowly progress to what he is in the games. The more insane and unhinged Eggman. But you get to see that by the end of the first film. And then in the second movie, Jim Carrey has fully become lore-accurate Eggman. He is absolutely fucking nuts, and I loved every second of his performance. And that's what I really love about that first movie. He starts out kind of unrecognizable as Eggman, but slowly through the movie, you get to see him become the Eggman we know and love. And honestly, I would have it no other way. Jim Carrey literally is Eggman. He's cruel, he's evil, he is heartless. Everything that he does, even down to the things that he says, just like Game Eggman, he basically does not give a shit about life at all. He loves his machines, and God, he is just great. Now, before this section gets too long, let's actually talk about the second movie along with Tails and Knuckles. So, the second movie is much more what I want out of a Sonic film. The first movie, again, definitely felt like a buddy road cop movie with Sonic elements, whereas the second movie actually has more of the Sonic lore, if you will. It's a very loose adaptation of the Sonic Free and Knuckles storyline, while also having some Sonic Adventure stuff thrown in there to set up for the third movie. The second movie even respects the characters more than the first film does. Let's start with Tails. Tails is pretty much the same way he is in the games. I'm gonna be honest with you. There's not too many differences between the movie version and the game version of Tails, but there's nothing wrong with that. It really didn't need to be changed or anything. I also love the fact that Colleen O'Shaughnessy, who is the voice of Tails in the games, gets to play him in the movie. It's always nice to see. Now let's talk about Knuckles. Knuckles is really, really good in this movie. For starters, he's not an idiot like he is portrayed in some of the 2010s games. And for another thing, he's just a fucking badass. Like, they really captured the wild, strong energy of Knuckles really great in these movies. And I think that's the best thing about Knuckles, is how well he's able to go toe-to-toe with Sonic, but also just the fact that he's got a heart of gold, honestly. He's just a guy who cares about his family, and he is really sweet. Also, the story of Sonic Movie 2 just feels more like a Sonic movie rather than the first film did. Obviously, the main inspiration for the story is Sonic Free and Knuckles because, you know, Knuckles going evil, then turning good, all that stuff, you know. We all know the story of Sonic Free and Knuckles. But what differs the two is that Sonic Movie 2 is more of a loose adaptation. It also takes elements from the first Sonic Adventure and a little bit of the second Sonic Adventure because they set up Gun in the second movie, which is pretty shocking that they kind of stitched all these plot lines together, but it really works. Also, in my opinion, there are some similarities to Sonic Unleashed, mainly just because the story of that game is kind of a globe-trotting adventure to get a MacGuffin, and that's kind of what Sonic 2 is when you really think about it, so the stories are somewhat similar. But we've talked about the plot long enough, we've talked about the characters, now it's time to talk about another thing that these movies excel at. Now, obviously, these movies have a lot of fun little references for the fans that relate to the games or other media. In Sonic Movie 1, it was kind of smaller stuff, like poses from certain games that Sonic would do throughout the movie, kind of blink and you miss it moments, and obviously the most famous and infamous reference, Crazy Carl holding up the Sonic drawing. God, peak cinema right here, ladies and gentlemen. But I would argue Sonic Movie 2 is way better at giving us some great fan service. First of all, the way that they introduced the Chaos Emeralds and the Master Emeralds was genius. I love the lore behind it in this universe, and I love the way that they're utilized. Obviously, having Super Sonic at the end of the movie was also great. Sonic Movie 2 even references certain scenes from games and other forms of media. For example, during the Sonic and Knuckles fight, they show a scene that is very familiar to the Sonic X Knuckles and Sonic fight, which I thought was pretty cool. They also have Sonic do an adventure pose in the bar scene where they have to do the dance-off. I thought that was very cool. And of course, my favorite reference in the entire movie, the opening scene of the film is a direct reference to the opening scene of Sonic Adventure, which is fucking peak. The animation for the CG characters too is very good. They all emote very well. Sonic himself is very expressive, and easily the best part about the CG animation is the fight scenes. The scene between Sonic and Knuckles, they went so hard. They just cooked. I'm not gonna fucking lie to you. And that scene with the Death Egg robot where Team Sonic has to take it down. These movies are just peak. Like, they knew exactly what the fans wanted. It is a miracle that we got that redesign, because I could not imagine any of these scenes with those awful CG models they had originally planned. In short, I think that the Sonic movies are incredible. I think they've done a lot of good for the brand, and I'm very, very excited for the third movie, especially now that they're going to be adapting the Sonic Adventure 2 storyline and bringing Shadow into things. And I'm also pretty excited for the Knuckles TV show. I don't know if they're going to set anything up necessarily in that, but it'll be a fun watch, I'm sure. And honestly, these movies are great. If you love Sonic, you're most likely gonna love these movies. And that's really all I have to say. So, see you next time.